So let's begin. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. To be honest, I'm really happy to connect with such friendly professional community and share our insights onto how you can manage virtual machines at scale. Before we begin, let us introduce ourselves. My name is Luba Kulakova, and my co-host today is Danny Knox. I'm a senior product manager at Parallels and lead B2B segment for Parallels Desktop. It's a virtualization software that allows to run different operating systems like Windows, Linux, legacy macOS on macOS. I work closely with Mac admins to understand technical challenges you face. And over the past 6 years, I have been immersed in the world of virtualization, working on products for both edge virtualization and server side. My goal right now is to improve the management of virtual machines at scale for your organizations. Danny?
Right, so I'm a senior sales engineer at Parallels. I support basically the folks that we get to talk to on a daily basis to understand how to place Parallels desktop enterprise within the organization. I'm about 20 plus years in the EUC space, Windows and Mac, based out of Carnation, Washington, so kind of tucked up on the other side of the country, up in the Pacific Northwest. All right, let's take a quick look at today's agenda. First, we'll introduce the subject, laying out why virtualization is useful in modern IT and education. Then we'll explore different layers of virtualization and control over it. We'll share practical demos, or better to say videos, that will illustrate these controls. Demos sometimes don't go the way you want them to go, so we'll show some videos. We'll have some time for Q&A session and to address any questions you might have. So without further ado, let's jump into why do you use virtualization? Well, simply put, virtualization offers a unified platform where you can run Windows apps, Linux, tools, legacy software, or on our favorite Macs. We love our Macs, but sometimes our teams need that one Windows app or access to other operating systems to do their jobs. Virtualization allows access to other operating systems to run everything on a single MacBook, blending convenience with technical versatility. Right? So in corporate world, think of virtualization as a secret weapon. Developers can test software across multiple operating systems. A lot of the universities we work with have a BYOD program where students bring the Mac that they know and love. So it provides a safer kind of scenario for legacy Windows apps that can work seamlessly. Right? In education, virtualization means students and staff can use their favorite devices while still accessing needed Windows and Linux apps. It enables safe experiments without kind of blowing up the system, and it's perfect for labs, right? A lot of Mac labs out there where it's basically the Swiss Army knife with Windows, Linux, Ubuntu, and everything else that they need to have, right? So it's perfect for a lab as the main hardware. Today we'll focus on edge virtualization, where everything runs locally on the end user's device. So we're not talking about streaming, where it's coming from a centralized server and being presented, right? So to illustrate this, we'll be referring to Parallels Desktop, a well-known solution that demonstrates how macOS integrates with other operating systems. Kind of in short, Parallels Desktop or any similar virtualization software acts as a bridge between macOS and another operating system. For example, Windows, which is often needed to run legacy apps, right? So Apple's macOS provides a necessary framework for virtualization that Parallels Desktop needs to run on, right? So that way it passes all that to legacy OS, app to function as if it were to run on actual hardware. So this will be the basis for our talk today.
Now, let's talk about your organization. You probably manage your devices. In a standard managed Mac environment, you set up your computers and you control your computers. Your Macs are probably enrolled into MDM and you have all the information about inventory. You can control things like software updates, security settings, specific applications and their functions, and even encryption. However, if your employees add edge virtualization into your environment, it creates an additional layer that is not controlled by you. The key issue here is that operating system inside the virtual machine is separate from macOS and falls outside of the control of your existing Mac management. Think about it. If a virtual machine can store sensitive source code and access your corporate network while having access to internet and external devices, it creates potential security gaps. So, to answer a common question, do I need to manage virtual machines for my employees? I say yes. But the level of control depends on your situation. Virtualization has multiple layers, so does its management. And let's take a quick look at those levels on a high level first. We have 6 levels here corresponding to the architecture of virtualization. At the bottom, you might not control anything at all and leave it all up to the users. As we go deeper, you gain the ability to control access to virtualization and virtual machines themselves. Then, you can control the operating system inside those virtual machines and even specific applications like Windows applications to provision Windows applications to your users to do specific job. When simplifying end-user experience and considering the overall system security, it's crucial to recognize these levels. There isn't one-size-fits-all path. Your choice will depend on your situation. So, consider your organization security restrictions, the level of flexibility your users need, and their technical expertise. And of course, the amount of effort you are ready to allocate for this management. Ultimately, as the admin, you will decide what level of control is right for you, your environment, and your users. Here's how it works. With each level, you unlock more options. This overview gives you a big picture of different options available on each level. In a couple of minutes, we'll go deeper into each level with the examples of what you can do, with videos of how you can do. But right now, we will pause here and explore the steps, management steps that are added with each level and the use cases. So, you will start with consolidating activations of your users and Parallels Desktop using this. At the start, you will begin with consolidating licensing and activations of Parallels Desktop for your users. You will be able to deploy Parallels Desktop and automatically activate your users. Then you will go, here, you can see the management step. Then you will go into the deployment of virtual machines themselves and consider their security by managing capabilities of these virtual machines, like isolation or encryption, or that one specific security setting of the virtual machine. As we go deeper, you will be able to control the operating system inside the virtual machine by enrolling operating system into MDM or simply controlling the Windows updates. And as the last management step, we'll have provisioning of Windows applications to your users while hiding Windows overall for them. And I know this all seems like a lot, and each management step adds more activities and tasks for you. But with the right tools, it can be easier to manage. And it significantly secures your environment while simplifying the end-user experience. You might also notice that we have mapped out use cases to these levels. So, for instance, students and developers need flexibility and focus for cross-platform focus and access to multiple virtual machines. So there is no need for you to manage the operating system or virtual machine extensively. For landing libraries and labs, pre-configured Windows is ideal, or Linux, since a single computer is shared between multiple users. You don't want users to bother with Windows setup or Linux setup. So these systems will be ready for use once they get the laptop. For contractors and BYOD scenarios, the goal is to provide controlled, isolated environment while not managing their hardware. And virtualization helps, together with management of operating system inside it. And finally, for employees who primarily use Mac devices but need one Windows application to finalize their accounting, for example, you want this Windows application to be so seamlessly integrated with macOS so that Windows itself is hidden. This way, they won't be confused by two operating systems running on a single Mac. So, let's explore each level in more detail and see the examples.
We'll start with the base level, where you don't control anything. At this stage, users or students typically set up and configure everything on their own. We worked with many of these students by them purchasing parallels, usually at their bookstore, and then doing their own self-install, getting their own virtual machines put together. You might still offer them recommendations on supported hardware, software, for example, setting ideal configurations for specific apps needed for classes. And we work with a lot of universities to come up with documentation for best practices. And a lot of times it just comes from the students telling us what they went through to actually get that to install. And we've done that with things like SolidWorks and ArcGIS to figure out what's the best way to do the install. You might still offer them, as I mentioned, those recommendations, but we definitely are there for them for that 24/7 support. And to be honest, with today's technology and powerful M-series chips, even entry-level Macs can run virtual machines without issues. Another option on this level is to get insights into whether your users already run virtual machines. You can do that with MDM extension attributes.
And let's look at the example of Jamf and Parallels Desktop. Parallels has prepared scripts that you can use as extension attributes in Jamf to get basic information whether your users have already Parallels Desktop running. You can see if they have Parallels Desktop and number of virtual machines. Go to GitHub, get the script, copy it to Jamf, and configure extension attributes. In inventory, you will see how many virtual machines your users have and their Parallels Desktop license or editions of this license. This does not provide a lot of insights, but rather tells you if the virtualization is widely used in your organization. Then, you can consolidate the management of these virtual machines and switch to the next level, where you can control who gets to work with virtualization. So, here you can choose to block running non-approved virtualization software by using restricted software in Jamf. When your users try to install or run non-approved software, it will be deleted at once. Quite a simple configuration for you as an admin. But please provide a clear explanation for users. They will still be annoyed to not be able to run something they want, but at least they will understand why. For the approved software, you can consolidate all the activations and control who works with virtualization by consolidating activation centrally and by deploying virtualization software to them via MDM or via invitation links. For a corporate environment, you would stay on this level if your users are pretty technical and can configure everything by themselves. They need cross-platform focus and access to multiple virtual machines. For education institutions, this level is helpful if you want to give access to your students, access to virtualization for a specific period of time, as you can set an expiry date for a specific user group. This stage has different options, and depending on the size of your organization and the use cases. So here you can decide between per user management with single sign-on or per device automatic activation. Even with per device automatic activation and management, you can configure multiple user groups using sub-licenses. This allows you to separate the control and set expiry date for a specific group of users. For example, to not allow running Parallels Desktop after the project is completed for your contractors. For smaller teams that don't use MDM solutions, you can invite users via email. They will get a link to download and automatically activate Parallels Desktop. They won't need to bother with license keys. The activation will happen automatically using the parameters in the download link. For those of you who do manage Mac devices, you would push the application through Jamf catalog, along with the configuration profile to specify the method of activation. For labs and landing libraries, it makes sense to push automatic license key activation, since a single computer is shared between multiple students. If you want to secure your virtual machines for known users only, you can integrate with your identity provider and push your users and enforce your users to use single sign-on experience. So here how it looks like on a high level. You have your MDM and you have parallel services. You can centrally decide what experience and activation method your users should have, and Parallels Desktop has tools for both of environments, unmanaged and managed. This scheme covers multiple use cases and not specifically a single organization. But if you need to or want to, you can still combine it so that tests and use per device management while users continue with single sign-on. And once activated, you'll be able to see the usage of all your users and computers regardless of their activation method.
Along with the software deployment, you can provision VM images to your users. We also call them gold images. This way, end users don't need to bother configuring virtual machines and Windows by themselves. You can do that for them. And this can be done for all types of VMs, whether it's Windows, Linux, Mac OS. It gives you a broad capability for building those images for delivery. This level is mostly for simplifying the end user experience and keeping consistency across users. You prepare a VM with all the necessary applications and settings and deploy it either via MDM or assigning it in the management portal. So think of this as kind of Microsoft MDT, creating an image, getting it ready for deployment. For universities, it'll help you equip labs and lending libraries with VMs for your students. And again, that could be Windows, Linux, Ubuntu. Really helps turn that single Mac Mini into a single device, and we see that flip happening where it goes from a single purpose Windows lab into multiple OSs on a single Mac Mini. There's an option to block usage of VMs that are not provisioned by you, so that your users will not be able to create any custom VMs. Or if you notice that a VM does not comply with company policy or it was infected, to prevent security attacks, you can simply delete remotely the unwanted VM from your user's computer, and that also puts the license back into the pool to be ready for the next allocation. Let's look at the example of the VM deployment with golden images in the management portal.
And again, we'll use video, not demo, not to mess it up. So within Parallels Management Portal, you can specify a link to the virtual machine with pre-configured windows and settings that can be used, that can be stored internally on or in a cloud share. You will then push the image to your user groups along with the checksum to verify the integrity of the operating system and the virtual machine. With a single click, your users will be able to download and install the Windows. But this removes the need for them to set up it manually, and they can start to use it right away. Sorry. You will be able to see all the usage of your users, all the VMs in the Parallels Management Portal to monitor who actually works with virtual machines. Next, we can control capabilities of the virtual machines your users have. Here, you would decide if you allow the operating system inside the virtual machine to communicate with macOS, its files and applications, or if you prefer to completely isolate the virtual machine so that clipboard and files are not shared between two systems. Bless you. You can configure virtual machine settings and specific virtual machine settings and block any changes to them by your users. Note that isolated environment and encryption can be crucial to enable contractors and BYOD scenarios. This way, you will ensure that corporate information is processed within virtual machine only and not stored on the personal hardware that you don't have control over.
Virtual machines have multiple configuration options to enable VM OS to function effectively. On the right-hand side, we see our Parallels preferences, and we set these per virtual machine. And think of this as kind of like a group policy on the Windows side, but this governs the virtual machine and all of its settings to allow an administrator to have very granular capabilities for setting up things that you would want to handle, right? So maybe how much CPU and memory is allocated to the virtual machine. That's a little bit of a sweet spot kind of negotiation to figure out how much does the physical Mac device have, how much should the virtual machine have to run appropriately, right? Because it will need the appropriate amount of RAM and virtual procs for the applications that are inside of that virtual machine. And so you may want to run a couple of application tests to run it, see how did it run, did it look good, shut it down, bring it back up again, see is it really running as expected. Well, you'd want to govern that and not really let that go to an end user who might inappropriately set too much, thinking, hey, if I give it way more memory and way more processing power, well, that usually is a drag on the host Mac itself, right? So there is a sweet spot you want to look at. And then what about like network settings, right? For bridged or shared, maybe setting up a hybrid Wi-Fi or networking, wired networking setting, right? Because you can add more NICs to the virtual machine. So those are, again, things that an administrator who's building the image may want to hold very close to the vest, so to speak, and not let somebody make changes to. So we want to make sure that whatever we set for that virtual machine is appropriate, but then know that that may change, right? There may be a need for those settings to change, but then how do we do that, right? We need flexibility so that a full-fledged operating system with advanced features like this has everything that it needs. However, in some environments, you may want to disable a lot of those VM capabilities.
And actually, you can also control these settings remotely from Parallels Management Portal. So that you don't need to adjust specific settings for each user separately. This is also helpful to ensure that all your users are enforced with the same settings to keep consistency across the team. And if you need to adjust the settings after the deployment of our golden image that we have discussed previously, it is really easy to do with policies in Management Portal. But please note, the current screenshots are just a preview of what's planned to be released later this year. And we'll love feedback on that as well if you want to control specific settings. I also briefly mentioned encryption, but it's an important topic to have just one liner about this, so I will pause and go a little bit deeper on that as well. Encryption of a virtual machine can also be controlled remotely by policies. You can enforce encryption onto all virtual machines your users have, and it will be bound to your corporate Parallels license. Such configuration secures virtual machine image, or better to say disk, so that virtual machine and the data inside is accessible only to users who have your Parallels license. For example, you can force your computers to use your license via configuration profile via MDM and not to allow personal license keys. If the evil person gets the copy of your virtual machine image or virtual machine and they don't have your license key, they won't be able to run it, work with it, or take the data, your sensitive data. This way, you can also secure virtual machine image, golden image, that you have prepared before on the previous level to distribute to your teams. So when creating a virtual machine, enforce encryption onto that, upload it to a file share, and push to your users. Since you already control Parallels Desktop activations and know all the users who use Parallels Desktop within your organization, you have full control of who gets to work with your virtual machines. Let's see how it looks like in the UI. Encryption of a virtual machine is forced by policies using do not allow to run VM without the company's license. Once enforced, and Parallels Desktop gets the policy, it will encrypt all registered VMs, whether they are running, suspended, or not. The running VMs will be suspended and then encrypted. All new created virtual machines will be encrypted as well. Usually, this process is quick, but depends on the hardware specifications and the size of the virtual machine. If the encrypted virtual machine is copied outside of your control, the evil person, or they, won't be able to get access inside, and they will be notified that they are not welcome here. Another important step to enable contractors and BYOD scenarios is to control virtual operating system inside the virtual machine itself. In this case, you don't manage their personal devices, but rather allow access to corporate resources from within the virtual machine. This level is also for those of you who have zero trust policy in the organization, and you need to control both operating system, main and virtualized one. To ensure security of such access and zero trust policy, you can enroll operating system inside the virtual machine into MDM. Intune in case of Windows, or Jamf or other MDM solution in case of macOS virtual machine. This could be done during the image preparation, which we discussed in the previous step, using sysprep or provisioning profiles, or with declarative enrollment via login or enrollment links. But if you want to keep Windows up to date only and control only Windows updates, you can actually stick to Mac MDM scripts. And again, we will see it on the example of Parallels Desktop and Jamf. I won't be showing you enrollment into Intune, but rather scripts for keeping Windows up to date via MDM, because it's much more simpler and fun. So Parallels has prepared scripts. You can find them on GitHub, And with extension attributes, you can monitor if the virtual machine in your organization have any Windows updates pending. And if yes, you can enforce these VMs to update it. Copy the script from GitHub and configure everything in Jamf. There are different modes to the script so that you can force Parallels Desktop to start a VM, check the updates, force reboot if needed, and so on. Because the Windows updates sometimes require reboot, and users don't like to shut down the virtual machine. The script will install all the pending updates for Windows inside those virtual machines. After checking the Jamf policies, Parallels Desktop will be instructed to start a virtual machine and check the updates. It does not require any interactions from the user or you, so you will be only monitoring this status in Jamf. For users, it might look like just a simple application update. And once this is done, they will be able to continue working with their Windows. In Jamf, you will see that Windows is up to date, well, until the next release from Microsoft.
At this point, you can decide to hide Windows from users overall. You will focus on the Windows app deployment and simple end-user experience. This is helpful for non-technical users who need that one Windows application to do their job. Note that there is still Windows underneath the application, but there are ways to hide it from the users. For example, what we call coherence mode. Such a mode uses all kinds of tricks to remove references and visual elements of Windows, so applications look and mimic the Mac OS user experience. You essentially see the application only without other OS running in the background. You don't see the Windows UI, but you do get the Windows flag down on the bottom of the dock to be able to launch it and then navigate throughout Windows. There are integrations like that between Windows app and Mac OS. Apps in the coherence mode have commands in the Mac menu bar. They respond to Mac keyboard shortcuts. There's an ability to copy and paste between Mac and Windows apps and much more. You could place icons down in the dock, pin them there for your applications that are most used, just to launch them right there. And when they're in coherence mode, again, you never see the full Windows UI. Maybe you just see Excel from Windows pop up, and it just looks like it's being served up from the Mac.
And for you as an admin, you can actually deploy a virtual machine image in this mode, so that your users don't see Windows at all, even during the setup. It takes only 20 minutes, well, depending on the internet connection your users have, to download and automatically configure virtual machine in the background. The app icon is added to the dock during the deployment automatically, and by clicking on it, users will be able to work with application without seeing Windows. It should start right away. So, for you, you still keep control over what's happening with virtual machine. You can control the sharing capabilities between virtual machine and macOS. You can control the encryption and security and isolation. You can monitor what your users have in terms of how many virtual machines they have and if they use it or not. But your users get a very simplified user experience and they don't see Windows overall. So they are not confused and they continue to work as if they were working on the macOS application. Isn't it cool? So let's recap. Now this table should make more sense to you. We have covered multiple options in the presentation, and you have the big picture here again. We have discussed both simplification and security of virtual machine and management of virtual machines. we have covered access to virtual machine, deployment, management, security, operating system inside the virtual machine, and even specific applications like Windows applications. So it is up to you to choose level of what you like and to enforce your users onto it. So keep control of what's happening in your environment, and feel free to send us feedback. Another important point I almost forgot to mention, that we already have customers that started with no control at all when they had multiple, like hundreds of licenses purchased individually by their users, and they slowly getting into each level of control, first by consolidating all the licenses into the single business account and controlling those licenses and activations, and then deploying the virtual machine, deploying the security onto the virtual machines, and controlling the operating system. So there is a process to do so, and if you have any individually purchased licenses, we can consolidate it for you. With that, we will switch to Q&A, but at first, if you have any, we would love your feedback. And if you have any questions, any suggestions, feature requests, or just want to say that you love Parallels, feel free to drop us a message in the Parallels channel, or DM me at Kulakova or at Denny. Feel free to scan for raffle and send the session feedback using QR codes. So thank you, and we will start with questions.
Yay.
Cool. The first 3 questions will get a backpack. I'm not kidding. We have backpacks. So feel free to raise a hand. Oh. Wait, please wait. We have a microphone, please. Yes.
Yeah, if I don't hit it.
He hit his Mac.
Hello. Yes, I work at Wake Forest University, and we've started using Parallels for our engineering department. And as you said, SolidWorks, Fusion 360, a couple other applications work fantastic. We have for our engineering department, we do say bring Windows boxes, but kids don't listen, and they just bring whatever they want. So most of them are bringing Macs, and being able to run these Windows-only applications without having to build a lab or having to deploy loaner machines has really been kind of a lifesaver. So I know most of us have been using Parallels for a long time, but in this particular use case, it's really been nice. We also use it for our administrative staff who are having to use Windows-only applications when, of course, they want to have Macs because Macs are cool and Windows are not cool. And so being able to run some of their financial applications in Parallels has made everybody very happy. So there you
Thank you.
Like, even though it wasn't the question, you still get a backpack.
Okay.
And I promise we didn't plan this guy, so I've never seen him in my life.
Yeah, and, to be honest with you, I built a Parallels VM earlier in the conference, so everything worked very good.
Thank you.
Windows 8086 versions, the emulation and anything like that, is there anything on that? Because we do have problems with the alpha-based stuff.
I would say you can explore it already right now and experiment with it and see how it goes. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's there. It's not up to our standards of performance.
That's what we found. It's kind of like a crapshoot.
We really hope that Microsoft does a lot more work for us by introducing their compatibility layers in Windows for ARM, but it is what it is. Majority of apps do work, right? But there are some cases where they might not. Yeah.
Back over there and back over there.
Hey, I was going to ask if you had any experience with if you deploy cross-track sensor on a macOS device, and then you have to deploy it on the VM also, obviously different operating system. Do you guys have any conflicts, any experience with inside VM or cross-track sensors conflicting because it's running on the same device, two different operating systems, or any experience with that?
No, we do have a customer experience program that records application usage. Did it fail? Did it pass? We don't, and ticketing systems, right? So we don't have any tickets that I'm aware of with any issues with that. Now, not to say that somebody hasn't had one, but no, we don't have any kind of anecdotal, feedback that this was a problem that Parallels needed to be pay attention to. So no, I haven't seen anything like that.
Okay. Thank you.
But if you have any feedback, we would appreciate technical information or any kind of details that we can look into.
We're going to deploy some parallels, so we were just discussing that if, one sensor doesn't fit all, so
Yeah.
we were trying to see if it's going to create any conflict before we do. We're going to test it obviously, but we were trying to see.
Sure. Yeah, and if just in general, we do have a trial software program, but we could definitely go into a POC with you if you'd like, at a more programmed level where we could partner on, your experience to understand and learn from, what you're going through.
So do you know if there's any issues between deploying 64-bit applications and running them on the virtual machine if it's a Mac Silicon or like an ARM processor?
No. Right, because Microsoft pretty much has taken care of a lot of emulation with their Prism abstraction layer, kind of like Rosetta, right? So there's a lot of applications just flat out work. But it is a test by test kind of basis for a lot of applications you might want to do some what ifing on. And again, that kind of falls into using our trial or getting in touch with us for a POC. We could definitely do a deep dive on our customer experience database to see if there's specific applications maybe that you're wanting to know about. Yeah, the Windows Prism abstraction layer takes care of a lot of software.
Are you asking specifically about like 32 versus 64-bit, or like just in general 64-bit applications?
Just in general, like either 32 or 64, just because I know like there's some applications that we have to do like specific ARM versions if we're running it in a Silicon environment or if we're running it in an ARM environment. So I'm curious if there's any issues with that between the two.
We recently did an educational webinar with Apple, and I demonstrated SolidWorks working on M4 machine, but that was obviously a x86 64-bit application running inside virtual machine. It worked, so there were no issues. I mean, obviously, I didn't have time to go like very deep into functionality of the app, but it worked. We still have 3 more backpacks, actually, even though Luba said that we have 3, so I'm going to give those remaining backpacks right now.
Oh, there is, yeah. Continue.
I am interested in the parallel settings restrictions that you can set per instance of Parallels.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm understanding this correctly, you explained that you can deploy those restrictions from the central Parallels portal. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that that is something that existed. My organization doesn't have access to that because we don't centralize Parallels where we manage all of the licensing. It's more of a department per department. So if the accounting department needs Parallels, they give it out. If the development department, they do it. So it is very granular.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have access to that portal, but I do deploy Parallels over Jamf.
Okay.
So back to those Parallels app restrictions, can I configure those by configuration profile or policies in Jamf instead of using that Parallels portal?
Not at the moment, but we will be working on APIs for integration with Jamf and other NDM providers that you can use for more granular configuration. I would like a follow-up question then for you. What kind of restrictions are you looking into?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Because this is the first time I've really been considering this. We are the use case that you described, where really the people who need it only do one thing with it.
Okay.
Just one app per department. So we would, we don't generally follow zero trust, but I think if we started implementing security the way that we should with our virtualization, we would have a kind of zero trust model where each department would only have access to one app and use it that way.
We can also arrange a more detailed discussion to see your use case in more details and how we can accommodate it and help to control per department and for specifically your department as well. You can stop by our booth later, and yeah, we will continue specific discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, get ready.
Whoa. Yeah.
So my question is on the hardware support. Does Parallel provide hardware support in terms of USB, printers, GPU acceleration? The reason I ask is right now we are not allowing Parallel on Mac environment because of security concerns, the ZTNA stuff. We use Citrix, and in that the Windows shell. But I understand from your colleague, the benefit is that there's a local power, processing power that you can leverage on Parallels compared to that. So we have trading desks and stuff of like those kind of personas. So tell us a little bit about those kind of feature set of hardware support. And can I have, we use Jamf, can I have 2 parallel instances on the same Mac managed by Jamf separately? Those are the 2 questions.
Okay, first one about the about the support of external devices, printers, and so on. You can connect USB's external devices to virtual machine and move files from the virtual machine to the external devices, print them, and so on. So you can connect it, and you can also control it. So one virtual machine gets the work with external devices, and the other can block it. So the second question was about having 2 instances of Parallels Desktop on a single machine, right? When you're talking about Parallels Desktop, are you looking for different virtual machines or different Parallels Desktop instances overall?
I'm looking at Jamf managing the Mac, but the Parallel instance separately, can it manage the separate instance of Parallels?
I think it's about the VM.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you can deploy Parallels Desktop using Jamf, and you can install multiple virtual machines on a single computer. And this virtual machine can have different operating systems. So you can have Windows, Linux, and older macOS on a single computer.
I want to quickly add, actually, because you raised an interesting point, and we see a lot of customers who have Citrix moving to the edge virtualization, like the virtualization on a device. A, because Citrix, as we know, is raising prices for a lot of customers, and B, a lot of people appreciate the performance when you do virtualization on a local device. We would love to learn more about your specific use case. So thank you. I'm sorry, I ran out of backpacks.
I got enough backpacks. Curious, we have a few employees who use iPad as their primary machine, and iPads have M2s and M4s now. Apple's even giving it a menu bar. You guys have any interest, any timeline where you might support VMs on iPad?
Do we have anyone from Apple in this audience by any chance? Because you're absolutely right. The M2s, M4s, even on the hardware level, they do support virtualization. It's the framework for hypervisor that is missing in the operating system itself. The way Apple built their operating system, they even Parallels have to use the Apple hypervisor framework for virtualization, and that's when we will be able to deliver it on the iPad when that framework comes to the iPad. I hope that with menu bars and better mouse pointer and stuff like that, I mean, M4 iPad Pro is basically like more powerful than a lot of Macs. Having virtualization there, no brainer, in my opinion. So yes, Apple, if you're listening or watching this video, thank you.
We have a 3D printing lab that also incorporates some laser engraving and things like that. They were looking earlier for some Adobe software that was Windows only, but would require some graphics processing ability. Are there any like best practices in terms of setting that up?
Do you want to take this or?
So it will depend on specific requirements. So Parallels Desktop does have 3D acceleration. There are a lot of games that are running already inside of virtual machine with the acceptable performance. DirectX 12, though specifically for games, is the holy grail that is, without spoiling a lot, I would say stay tuned for some updates from Parallels about that. For Adobe applications, I think it might have something to do with CUDA, right?
I'm assuming that it required a lot of rendering, so machines in that particular lab have some beefy, at least the Windows ones.
So performance-wise, especially on the modern Macs, it's pretty good. Like even in virtual machine, it's pretty good. But it requires specific testing to see like any particular application, or if there are any issues. It might work out of the box.
Okay.
So it looks like we handled all of the questions.
Yay. Thank you very much for the interesting discussion and for coming here.
Thank you, Luba. Thank you, Danny.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.